when I've told people about this from time to time, they act with a sense of horror. What a terrible thing to happen to you. That sort of attitude, or how awful it must have been to grow up like that. I don't look at it like that at all. I mean, I think that I'm an incredibly fortunate person. I think that the loss of vision is just something that happened in my life. I mean, I don't think it's held me back at all. I would have not said that when I was 12 years old, because when I was 12 years old and I was not able to get a date, or maybe I should say 14 and not able to get a date, or go to parties and not really be able to tell which girls were prettier than the other girls, these are painful things. The idea that you're losing your vision and you can go in and in a couple of hours you can have some surgery that is going to turn it around for you, I think is a fantastic opportunity.
When Dr. Peyton first founded the eye bank in 1944, he asked a patient of his, Ada Breckenridge, to consider being the first executive director, because he knew that in order for the eye bank to get off the ground, there'd be need for publicity and for fundraising, because this is a nonprofit organization. Initially, eye donations came into New York from all over the country so that Dr. Peyton and a few other surgeons here could perform the transplant surgeries. But Dr. Peyton recognized that there was a need for eye banks across the country, and generously taught surgeons who came into New York to learn the surgical procedure about how to open an eye bank in their own cities and states. And so from there, also too, eye banks opened not only across the country from New York to Hawaii, but also around the world. The mission of the eye bank has remained the same over the past 63 years, and that is to restore sight through eye donations and corneal transplants, as well as to provide ocular tissue for much needed research into other cures and treatments for blinding eye diseases. As the executive director, I'm responsible for overseeing all functions of the eye bank, all activities, and that includes the ocular laboratory, public and professional education, as well as fundraising activities. A typical day means that patients are scheduled for surgery, and the laboratory technicians are busy evaluating donor tissue, processing it, and distributing it to the patients in a local transplant facility as the tissue becomes available. At the same time, hospital liaisons are providing education to healthcare professionals in medical facilities about the need for and the uses of the donor tissue.
I'm looking at a cornea from a donor in an optical vial under the slit lamp microscope to make sure that the cornea itself is good for a transplant. The cornea, as we know, is the front part of the eye, about the size of a contact lens. And as you can see here, this is the cornea, and you have the sclera, the white part that you can probably see. But when we look under the slit lamp, we're mostly looking at the clear part. We're looking at the contact lens part that's kind of concave, like your contact lens. That's what we look at when we look under the slit lamp microscope. The cornea is labeled so that you can see the date of death, the date the procedure was actually done, the time of death, and the time of preservation, as well as the sex and the age of the donor. Those are the main distinguishing markings that you see here on the label. When the first time during my training, when I went to a hospital to actually see the procedure done, it was a case where it was also an organ donor. And, to know that people actually go out and recover organs, but to actually see them recover the organs is a whole nother experience. But when you get their past medical history and their social history, and you connect that it's not just a cadaver, but it's actually someone's family, it's a loved one, it's someone's aunt, someone's uncle, someone's sister. That's when you're kind of like, okay, and it brings everything in more of a perspective, I would say, for me, than you just go in a biology class and it's just a cadaver in front of you. This is actually someone's family that you probably passed in the hallway on your trip to the hospital. You never know that you're recovering eyes from. So
how did you meet your wife, and how long were you two married?
We worked in the same building together. We worked in the same building, and we started talking, hello, how are you, and one thing led to another, and we got engaged and got married.
How did you find out that she passed? Was it very sudden?
It was a phone call to my job, exactly, that to come to the hospital. My wife was sick, and when I got there, they took me into the room, and she already died.
She passed away at the gym, is that what you said?
At the gym, yeah. She was on a treadmill exercising and had a massive heart attack and died on the spot right there. The eye bank called me at home that same night to ask me if I wanted to donate her eyes, and they agreed because of the person my wife was. She's a very giving person. I know she would have wanted to help other people. That's the kind of person that she was. So I didn't hesitate twice. I just did it.
Can you describe what your wife's eyes look like? Do you remember what they look like?
Yeah, they were beautiful. They were brown, a little brown and a little gray inside of it. They're just very, very beautiful eyes. I miss her a lot. She was the love of my life, and but knowing that her body parts was used to help other people makes me feel a little better, ease the pain a little. It's not letting go to waste that she did something. In death, she helped other people, as she did in life. Very giving person.
Well, I have a very interesting background. I went to medical school to become a psychiatrist, and during my schooling years, I became attached to Dr. Richard Troutman during an elective in ophthalmology. He was the chairman at the time of ophthalmology at Downstate and had a course in practical surgery for transplantation. And after seeing the effect of corneal transplants on a patient, I became very excited about being able to restore sight. My days are divided between a day in the operating room doing transplants, and another day I do laser vision procedures, and then the other days are spent seeing pre- and post-operative patients. Patients have an immediate response when you take the patch off the first day. Most patients have a wow factor where they weren't able to see anything prior, and then they're able to see very well the next day, and it continues to get better as the patient heals. So the instantaneous response, I think, is very exciting for the patients. I think that the fact that I wanted to be a psychiatrist actually helps me with my practice, because I spend a lot of time with the patients, and it's not just their eyes, it's their whole persona that I embrace and try to help. Patients with visual problems have a lot of emotional distress, and many times I find myself speaking with the family of the patient, their children, counseling them on how they need to adjust their lives, what exactly can be done, giving them expectations that are real as far as what we can do, and it becomes a very emotional experience. Well, one story in particular comes to mind, which is about a young woman in her early 20s who had a disease of her corneas where she wasn't able to see clearly because the corneas grew in the shape of a cone. And she had a young child, and she was at the playground with her young child and proceeded to pick up another child, thinking it was her child, out of the playground, where the parents came, the police came, trying to arrest her for taking the wrong child. So after I did her corneal transplant, she was so amazed at how she could finally see her child for the first time that she never had before.
What is your history with Howard Stein and his wife Gail, and how many of his cornea transplants have you kind of overseen?
Well, Mr. Stein had a number of transplants. A couple of them were done when he was very young outside of the country. And then Dr. Troutman did 2 of his transplants. and I did his most recent transplant, which was done only a few months ago.
I'm Howard Stein. I am 54 years old. I'm a designer by profession. I'm South African. I've lived half of my life in the United States, half of my life back in Africa in chunks. And I work up here in Bedford, which is about an hour north of New York City, on a variety of design projects, mostly dealing with patterns and surfaces for architectural and interior applications. Everything that my life is involved with is visual. My photography, my design work, my reading. I'm a big reader, big magazine reader and book reader.
How many cornea transplants have you had in your life?
I've had 5 corneal transplants. I had my first at about the age of 14. The second about a year later at 15. I was pretty much without vision for the 3 or 4 years before my first transplant. I had about 10% vision. Those transplants lasted about 18 years. Then they had to be done again in the late 80s. Now it is pretty much 18 years since I had those, and I had my left eye done about 9 months ago, 8-9 months ago, by Dr. Belmont in New York, and it might be the last, it might not. So the transplants themselves have been little miracles, in a way. But particularly the first one. The first one I would say was the true eye-opener, excuse the expression. As a kid, these things are much more important than they are as an adult. As an adult, you have a much more mature understanding of what it is to begin to lose your vision. Society is a different place to live in as an adult if you have visual problems. And kids are cruel. Kids tend to pick on you a lot more. I guess I got bullied a bit more because I didn't have the wherewithal or the confidence to stand up for myself. I think confidence really is what it's about. You don't have the confidence to say I'm losing my vision or I don't see very well. As a kid, you want to be able to say, that you're as good as any of the other kids. And of course I couldn't do that. It got to the point where I was no longer able to stay in school. I eventually had about 10% vision before my first operation. And at that point I was no longer going to school because there was no point. I missed a full 2 years of school. I became extremely photophobic, light sensitive. I couldn't keep my head up in sunlight. Everything becomes extremely soft. The world becomes extremely soft. You distinguish things in terms of light and dark, shades of grey. Everything loses its detail. And because it happens gradually, you don't really realize how severe it is until your vision is restored. My father went about finding out who the best surgeons were in the world for corneal surgery, and he picked a surgeon in Zurich, Switzerland, and I had to actually go to Switzerland and wait for 6 months. And I found that I was spending a lot of time in a dark room. Dark rooms always appealed to me because of my light sensitivity, and found myself some large sheets of paper, sort of butcher paper. I might have gotten it from the kitchen in the hotel, I don't really remember. And some thick chalks, black chalks, and I spread the paper out on this carpeting in this room in the hotel, and I began to draw, keeping my nose practically on the piece of paper. I found that I was able to distinguish a fairly thick graphite line on a white sheet of paper. I began to do it continuously, almost obsessively. I just began drawing. I had the surgery and I woke up, came out of the anesthetic, and after a day or two, they removed the dressing, and I looked down at the floor, and the floor was made of a sealed cork material. And this hit me like a thunderbolt, because for the first time in years I was able to see texture. And it's probably no accident that my work in the last 40 years has always had an element of texture to it. If I had become blind, I would have become some other kind of artist, a musician. I've always thought that if I were to become blind again, I would turn to something like sculpture. But music would probably be, even though I have no technical ability in music, I would turn to something like that, something creative. It would almost seem as though my lack of vision would have, disqualified me for any interest in the arts, and instead my interest happened in spite of my visual problem. The whole world is visual food. This happens to be an area where we're surrounded by a lot of woods. It is very beautiful. I like to watch the light and to walk around this area is beautiful. But I've taken as many photographs of graffiti on the sidewalk as I have of the woods. Once one has a visual interest and one's been trained somewhat to recognize that there's beauty in just about anything one can look at, then you see it wherever you are. There's an old expression that there are people who go around the world and see very little, and there are people who walk around the block and see an awful lot. And I'm one of those people who can walk around the block and see an awful lot. Anything and everything is capable of being interesting if you stop and take the time to look at it for long enough. And so again, the value of vision, it's indescribable.
Do you still kind of have a feel for what that was like to have such minimal vision?
Oh yes, clearly. I mean, I can conjure up the lack of vision instantly in my mind. I had that first surgery, and I had an instant level of sharpness which I had long forgotten existed. I saw the world with a vividness and with a richness of color and texture that I had forgotten. I do remember exactly what it's like to look at the world as basically extremely soft shapes that just blend together in forms of light and dark.
My name is Norman Pianco. I'm retired. I was an American history teacher for the city of New York. I taught on Staten Island. I love being retired.
What do you love about it?
I'm into sports. I do a lot of sports, and I used to play lacrosse at college. I played basketball in high school, and now I get to go to a lot of games and see a lot of different things. I've been very lucky. My vision in my left eye started to deteriorate a few years ago, and my ophthalmologist, Dr. Braunstein, decided that it's time for me to try the cornea transplant route. It's affected almost my entire life. I love to read, watch TV, do things, and the things that I like to do require good vision. And here I am today at my pre-op.
This is your pre-op, and then your surgery is on when?
Tuesday morning, hopefully, the surgery will take place.
Why do you say hopefully?
I'm nervous that if the cornea isn't found for me, that it may not take place on Tuesday. It may be postponed for a later date.
Right.
I'm anxious to get it done. It's funny that the eye it's something that makes you nervous because you take sight for granted. And here's something that could cause blindness, and if it doesn't work, what do we do? These are things that are on my mind. We get to the hospital, we sign in, we go upstairs, they're ready to give me a gown and get undressed in a room for the surgery. When we get a call that the cornea missed its flight, I guess we have the person who is delivering the cornea to the airplane to blame. And then we got another call that Dr. Florakis would come and speak to us. He told us that hopefully there'd be another cornea, or that cornea would get in and we would do the surgery in the afternoon, if possible. We went back to our apartment. No sense staying in the hospital for 6 hours or so. We're sitting around in the apartment nervously waiting for a phone call when Dr. Florakis' office called that the cornea would not get in on time and that the OR would close by 6, and therefore we are postponed for hopefully next Tuesday to do the surgery. At first we made a joke of it, like the cornea, you'd think that it would make the plane on time, but after a while it's not funny. It's kind of upsetting that it didn't, that they didn't have the cornea. The person did not deliver the cornea on time, and I'm very frustrated. I really want to get this done so that I can see my beautiful wife with my left eye as well as my right, and my beautiful grandchildren. We have 6 grandchildren. We have 5 children and 6 grandchildren.
Was that kind of a big kind of motivator for you to get the surgery done?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. A tremendous motivator to get this done at this time. I couldn't do it for the past 2 years. My wife has been seriously ill. Hopefully she's in remission, and now that I can do it.
What has your wife been struggling with?
Small cell lung cancer. We believe in God, and we've had a great life. My wife and I, we've done a tremendous amount of traveling, and we've had a lot of good times. And I look at the past 2 years as going through some tough times, but overall, we've had a fabulous life.
My mother had a heart condition. She was 62 years old, and she died, and she was at Beekman Downtown Hospital at the time. And one of the things that my mother had always said was that whatever she could donate to science, she would like to. Unfortunately, because it was a heart condition, the only thing she could give was her corneas. My sister remembered about her corneas and said, please, please save the corneas. And we watched them put a saline solution over her eyes on a piece of cotton or gauze. And several months later, we got a wonderful letter, which I still have, from the eye bank thanking us for it and letting us know that because of that, there were 2 people who could see now as a result of my mother. So it made us feel really good, and I'm sure it made the recipients feel really good. And hopefully they didn't have to go through what Norman has been going through. She felt that when you die, you should be able to help people who are living. And she had talked about it always, always, always. And this is back in the 70s. Here it is, 30 years later, and I'm still thinking about the eye bank and how great it is.
But they are critical to getting corneal tissue. They do all of the screening and the procurement of the tissue. And if it wasn't for the eye bank, we would not be able to perform this operation.
They do an amazing job, and I just am forever in their debt. They have helped me out now 5 times, and I know they are there if necessary in the future, and I just really have a lot of gratitude to that organization.
I would recommend people to donate their eyes to the eye bank. Something that I didn't think of before this, and now I would definitely recommend it.
For me, when I see people on a daily basis, and if someone they have a dog or a cane, and that their vision isn't all there, it's just like I wonder, maybe you'll be the next one that I can help through my job. So
I think it's a very good thing that they're doing, and they should keep on doing it. And potential donors, should think about donating their eyes and whatever they could donate to help other people after passing.
I would tell them what lifestyle changes are so dramatic with their gift. It's really a gift that they give someone.